acoustics. And acoustics is an incredibly broad topic. So I'm going to try to kind of focus the conversation on how to either set up a room to mix music for your content or to alter your existing room to better serve you for mixing audio for your content. So before we take a deep dive into this, let's get some fundamental things out of the way. So sound, as we discussed, I believe on the first day of class, that sound is air, moving air. It's sound waves that go through air. And sound can go through other things like water and whatnot, but we're going to kind of focus on it moving through air. And because it's a vibration that moves through the air, it's reactive. Okay, it bounces off of things. So the main focus in setting up a room to mix audio for your content, I always want to say music, but it's audio for your content, is to minimize what happens when sound bounces back, when you're hearing multiple waveforms in your ear. So let's go to the extremes, and then we'll talk about how sound works and kind of go from there. So I'm using a sine wave because it's a simple visual thing to see. Audio typically doesn't look this clean. It'll be more ragged, but for the most part, it all kind of reacts the same, and a sine wave is a lot easier to visualize. So this is what a sine wave looks like going through the air. Now, you hear audio in a room in a bunch of ways. So I did the thing with you guys where if you blow on your hand with your lips not touching your fingers, you're going to feel the wind that you blow out of your mouth hit your hand and come back, and you're going to feel it on your face. Especially me with my beard, I could feel it. So sound bounces off of things, so it's reactive to the surfaces that are around it. So when you hear audio in your room through a speaker, you're hearing a couple of things. The first thing you're hearing is the fundamental. Okay, so that's the sound coming directly from my speakers, or right to the sides of my monitor here. The sound coming directly from the speaker to my ear. You're also hearing something called a reflection. Okay, and that reflection is the sound that passes my head and bounces off what's behind me or next to me or above me or below me, and sound emanates outwardly. So you're hearing it go through, bouncing off all these surfaces, and those are called reflections. Okay, and some of those reflections are strong. They will affect the way you hear things, and some of them are weak. We call them, first order reflection, second order reflection, third. So it's the, think of a pool table, of a billiards table, and you hit the ball. That's that's the stick hitting the ball. That's your fundamental, and then it bounces off a bumper. That's a reflection. Another bumper, another reflection. Another bumper, another reflection. So think of it in that kind of way. So it's going to lose steam as it bounces off. But the first, depending on your surfaces and depending on how your room is set up, which is what we're going to talk about today, you'll start to hear these reflections. Now, here's where it gets tricky. So let's go to two ends of the spectrum. All right. So the first end of the spectrum, let's say you have this sine wave and it bounces back to your ear. So let's say the A is the fundamental. Let's say this is your ear right here. And let's say B is the first reflection, and they are bouncing back at themselves in a mirror image. Okay. This frequency cancels itself out. You won't hear it. It still exists, but you don't hear it. And let's say it bounces back, the reflection that you're hearing along with the fundamental is of the same frequency. It will double in volume. Okay. Now, these phenomena aren't everywhere. It's your ears in your room. So you end up hearing things differently than the rest of the world. Okay. So it will make you, oh, it's too loud, or it's not or not loud enough, and you start to make things louder or softer based on wrong information. Okay. And the louder part, so where it doubles in volume, that's called a standing wave. It's also called an eigentone or a room mode. It's got lots of terms, but it's a phenomenon that happens. It transcends audio. It happens in a lot of structures. So, for example, in an earthquake, okay, it's a massive vibration. So you have a beam, holding a building together, and a vibration that goes along that beam, and then it hits another beam and it bounces back over itself. If you keep your vibrations constant, you will end up with a standing wave. And so suddenly this beam that can probably hold its load and a half is now taking double its load because the intensity is doubled because of this vibration. The beam fails, the building falls, so on and so forth. We've all experienced this. Okay. You sing in the shower, okay, a very reverberant space, shower or a gym or something like that. There's always that one note that seems to sound a little louder than all the rest of them. Okay. That's a standing wave. That's an eigentone. Okay. You're hearing that, your ears in that space, you're hearing the reflection at the same frequency as the fundamental. So these are things that we try to avoid because, again, it's false information, and it's giving us a false sense of volume or amplitude. Here is a video to illustrate this point. I'm just going ahead a little bit. Okay. So the moral of this video is you have a bunch of metronomes that are swinging at different rates on a table. The table is obviously a little rickety. You could see it was swaying. As soon as the second one, as the guy was going through and he was starting off all these metronomes, as soon as two got in sync, that wave was stronger than all the rest of them and started to overtake all the other metronomes, and eventually they all go in line. Okay. I don't know why I just broke into jazz hands, but when I was a kid, we had a pool. We had like a little 4-foot pool in my yard, and we used to do this game called wave pool. My father hated it because it would ultimately all the water would come out of it. But we would try to bounce up and down and make the waves as high as we could. And I realized that if I put myself in a tube to make the surface area bigger, and if I jumped up and down, if I jumped up and down to a steady rhythm, the waves got exponentially higher. And it's that same theory. Okay, so we want to avoid this with audio. All right. So here's a little mental game that I've devised to think about how surfaces react to sound. So we want to try to minimize reflection. We want to minimize vibration in other things other than things that are supposed to vibrate, like our speakers. And there's a couple of actually, before I get into the mental game, there's a couple of other things that we need to take into consideration. So some of our goals might be keeping sound in from getting out. Okay, maybe we're in a space where we have neighbors that we don't want to bother. Keeping sound from getting in. Okay, maybe we have our studio on the ground floor of an apartment on Grand Concourse, and that's noisy, and we don't want that sound to come in and bother us. We want to minimize the reflections and tame the sound that is emanating from within the room and staying in the room. So these are all things that we need to take into consideration. So in order to do this, I like to think about, let's talk about the reflections first, and then we'll talk about absorption and all other stuff. Let's think of surfaces. Now, I had this mental game of thinking about how surfaces react to sound. So let's try to envision this contraption that I've devised in my brain, and it holds 30 balls, 10 ping pong balls to represent our high frequencies, 10 handballs, or let's say tennis, the handball is like a tennis ball without the fuzz, to represent our mid-range frequencies, and 10 of those red kickballs that we would use. And I used to call them a medicine ball, but I've learned that that's a medicine ball is a different thing. Like a kickball, like you could totally hear the sound of the kickball right now. So like, doink, to represent our low frequencies. Okay, and I have them all evenly spaced, and I could drop them all at once. Now I'm dropping them down, and I'm using gravity as our amplitude or volume. And the floor is going to be our surface to test out how sound reacts. So imagine, now it doesn't have to be a floor, but I'm using gravity because we could all sort of guess what gravity is going to do. And that's sort of how sound works. It's close enough that we could sort of figure out how a surface is going to react. So let's take a surface. Let's take a hardwood surface, flat hardwood surface, and I drop the 30 balls onto that surface. What's going to happen? Well, two things right off the bat are going to happen. They're all going to bounce. Okay, so they're all going to bounce, and they're all going to lose maybe a little bit of energy, but not much. And then they're going to bounce again and 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 again. So we know that hard surface is going to be very reflective, so not so good. We also know that those reflections are going to be back over themselves, also not good. So big, flat, hard surfaces are not really a good thing to have in your room. Okay, let's do some other stuff. Let's talk about carpet. Let's take an industrial kind of small pile carpet, and let's drop our 30 balls onto there and see what happens. What's going to happen to our high frequency balls, our ping pong balls? They may bounce, but they're going to lose a good majority of their steam. So small pile carpet, fantastic for high frequency reflections. Our mid-range balls, our handballs, what's going to happen when we drop those? They're going to bounce again, but they're going to, they're going to bounce, but they're not going to bounce super high. What about our kickballs? The big red balls, what happens when we drop those onto the part? Probably not much. It's probably going to react almost the same as it would to a hard surface, maybe just slightly less. So for low frequency treatment, tight pile carpet, not such a good thing. But for mid-range, okay, and for high frequencies, it's good. So let's think about some other surfaces. Tile again. So tile is going to react the same as hardwood, probably worse even a little bit. Which is why bathrooms are typically reverberant, because they're typically tiled on the walls. Gymnasiums are giant flat rooms with flat walls and flat floors, and the ceiling's not so much, but you get a lot of there's not obstacles in there. So let's talk about a concave surface now. Okay, let's talk about a bowl. So let's say I took three, one ping pong, one handball, and one kickball, and I'm able to drop them just onto this curved surface. What's going to happen? Well, not only is it not going to lose any energy, it's probably going to gain whatever the weight is. Probably some mathematical equation of how it's going to gain a little bit, right? So curved surfaces, not good at all. In fact, I want to show you something. There's a when I was in college, I lived across the street from this building or this campus called the Christian Science Center. I am in no way discussing or advocating for the religion, but the grounds were beautiful. In fact, there were some things on that ground that were just breathtakingly stunning. First of all, it was two buildings that were the same. One was standing up and one was lying down. So that in and of itself was super cool. It had a what do they call them? An infinity pond on it that was so big that they had to take into account the curvature of the Earth. So, I mean, just a bunch of really cool things. They had one of the largest pipe organs on the East Coast. So, you know, I got into the cool things in that space. But another thing they had was a maparium. And a maparium is a giant room that's basically a globe that you could walk in. Now, this maparium was glass, and it was spherical, and it had a gangplank that walked through the middle of it. I'll show you some pictures of it. So this is the room, and it's a spherical room, and you walk through this pathway that goes across it. And what was really freaky about this room was it was big. I would say that this room, if you think of our studio, our live room that we have that I took you guys in, this room wouldn't fit in that room. It's sizable. I could be at one end and someone else could be at the other end, and I could whisper, "Hey, how you doing?" And it would literally sound like my lips are right here. It was so freaky that I actually had to hold on to the railing because I felt like my knees kind of almost give way, because it just messed up everything in my brain. Sound picks up speed on this on these curved hard surfaces. So it reacts in a way that we're not used to hearing. So curved surfaces are bad. I also did a gig once. I was in a band and we were playing. It was a charity event. They were auctioning off a car. So it's kind of like a highbrow, charity event. And it was at a, this is going to sound weird, but it was a go-kart place upstate New York. I forget the name of it, but it was a really cool place. It was, the go-kart track was in a U around the space, and in the middle of the space was, there was a pool tables, there was foosball tables, there was a bar, there was a little eatery. It was just built. It was really bright and high end, and we set up, and because of this curved glass surface that went around the room, I remember I was playing bass in the band. I went over to my amp. I turned my bass all the way down. I turned my low mids all the way down, my high mids all the way down. It was just this muddy mess of things because my bass frequencies, which are loud. So remember, bass frequencies are longer. They're bigger. They take more time to evolve as opposed to higher frequencies, which are shorter. My bass frequencies, which because they're longer, they take more power to push, so they are inherently louder. Were bouncing around the room to the point where just everything sounded muddy. So curved surfaces, not so good. So now let's take another surface to think about. Let's go back to our mental contraption with the 30 balls. Let's say I went to Home Depot and I bought some 1/2-inch square molding, and I cut it into different lengths. Let's say I cut it into lengths of 1/2 inch, inch, and inch and a half, and then I randomly glued all of those together. Let's drop our balls on there and see how that works. So if I drop our ping pong balls, what's going to happen? It's going to reflect, but it's going to scatter all over the place. That's called diffusion. Okay, it's still going to scatter. It's still going to reflect. It'll bounce over there, and it'll probably bounce off the next surface. But the point is, it's not bouncing back to our ears. What about our mid-range balls? Let's say the handballs. What's going to happen to the handballs? Same thing. They're going to bounce all over the place. Low frequencies. Yeah, they're probably going to scatter. Some may bounce back. So it's okay for low frequencies. good for mid, and good for high. I want to show you guys a picture of a studio in Nashville, I believe. Let's see, where we at? This is called Blackbird Studio. It's kind of like what I was describing. This is actually George Massenburg's room. George Massenburg is one of the grandfathers of pro audio. On top of being an amazing engineer, he also developed some really, really high-end gear, which you could actually see here, that he's used and sold over the years. It's highly prized. But this room, which, by the way, I would not want to be the one to clean this room. I can just imagine the dust that's living in all of this. But this surface just takes the sound and just scatters it all over the place. So it doesn't go back to the listener, which is really the key here. I think I have another picture of the space. Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, here's another look at the room. So you can even see on the ceiling, there's that tile as well. Okay. And if you notice all of these speakers, by the way, this is a little aside. So this is a surround system. Okay. Judging by all this is probably Dolby Atmos, but you know, you could see kind of a cross section of it. But really good for stopping reflections. Oh, here's another picture of the Maparium. Yeah. What do we learn from this? So curved surfaces, not so good. Flat surfaces, not so good. 90-degree angles, good. Okay, so to combat reflection and the treatment of stuff in your room, the first and foremost, the best thing to do is to put stuff in it. The more stuff you have in your room, the better, because you have more right angles and less chance of it bouncing back and hitting your ear. Okay, let's talk about absorption now, because the next key to this is absorption. We talked about it with the carpet, okay, absorbing the impact of the high frequency ping pong balls and the mid frequency handballs. There are other absorptive materials, or also some that are called membranic materials. And membranic materials are basically cavernous boxes where sound that are covered with a surface where sound will go through them. A great example of this is something called a Helmholtz regulator. Oh, I'm sorry, Helmholtz resonator. I always say regulator. And what these are, so a Helmholtz resonator. So think of these as like little mouse traps for low frequencies. They go in, they bounce around, and they lose all of their steam, and then the sound doesn't bounce out. A great example of a homemade Helmholtz resonator was, I worked in a studio a couple of times that had, the live room was wall-to-wall books. On top of it being super vibey and ultra cool, the books were not deep enough to go back to the back of the wall, and they were not tall enough to go to the next shelf. So there was a gap, depending on the size of the book, about this much between the book and the next shelf above it. And then the book would be like, say, this long, but the shelf was this deep, and he would have all the books up in the front. So what happened was the frequencies would go into this and then bounce around in there and lose all of their steam. It was a great way to have a really cool vibe and have it be acoustically cool for recording. Probably one of the funnest studios I've ever been to. Some other things that we can do. So I don't know if you could see this here, but this here is actually a big foam panel that's going catty corner to this space. Okay, and this is called a bass trap. So on top of it being membranic, sound also goes in from here and then from the top, which you can't see. and it bounces around back in there. I have these panels here that absorb sound and stop it from reflecting. Now, bass frequencies is probably not going to do much, but it will do really good for the highs and the mids. And then I have a lot of stuff in my room. Okay, probably not the best that I have my guitars here, because guitars are resonant. So this is probably not the best thing to have in a mixing environment. In fact, I've just sort of redid my studio. I'm going to show some pictures of how it was when I first built it, and I've redone it, and I'm still in the process of trying to make the new space work. But where these guitars are, where you see, was where my mix desk was. So I'm sort of in a transitional period right now. But the couch and a whole bunch of other things, so it's really stopping the reflections from coming back. This room is small, so I do have, reflections are a big concern. So what can you do to combat reflections in your space? So again, stuff is the best way. Curtains, carpets, drapes on the ceiling. I know some people put flags and stuff. Right angles are really good. Space within stuff, so that sound can go in and bounce around, like the books. Stuff like that are going to be really good at combating this in your space. If your space is the same on all four sides, so let's say it's a perfect square, that's the most to worry about. It's the asymmetry is really key. So if you have a room that's, say, 9 by 9, that's a problem. So now you have this perfect space where things are just going to start bouncing back and forth at. Maybe consider, instead of treating it like a square, treat it like a diamond and put your desk caddy corner. That's one way that'll help. Or partition the room in some way if you can. So this is one of the biggest things, the biggest hurdles of this. Most of us, don't have the luxury of creating a space, right? And B, most of us don't have the luxury of altering our space, building walls, taking walls down, stuff. Obviously, that's something that most of us don't have the luxury to do. So we have to sort of work within the space that we have. Curtains are great at this. Putting up a curtain is a great way to partition a room. So all right, let's think about now keeping sound from getting in or out of your space. So I studied acoustics with a guy who said that he could tell someone's level of acoustic knowledge by the way they use the term soundproofing. And I didn't quite get it at first, and I sort of do now. Soundproofing is not something that's achievable. Sound is like water. If there's a way out, it's going to find a way out. And to achieve it in any way is incredibly expensive and really just not feasible. But there are ways to sort of minimize the sound from getting in or out of your space. So the first thing you want to do is you want to start to identify areas, weak areas, and what to do with those weak areas. The first and foremost is your window. Windows are always really, really bad areas of sound coming in and out of a space. Most facilities that are built to keep sound in or out have sealed double windows. I have a window in my, let me see if I have pictures of it here. So I have some construction pictures of my studio. So this is when it was being built. So I have a window here. So this is from the live room looking into the control room. So my head is probably right here right now on this side of the room. This is a window, and it's a sealed window, and there are two pieces of glass on it. And not only are there two pieces of glass, but they're laminated glass. It's called lamy in the industry, in the construction industry. And they're of two different thicknesses. So let's unpack that for a second. So a laminated glass is something you would have on like your windshield. So basically it's two thin pieces of glass, and a piece of clear kind of like plastic, and they're glued together. Okay, and the reason for this, on top of having cool sound properties, it doesn't shatter. So if a rock hit your windshield, it doesn't just go. It'll just it'll crack and then splinter out, and allow you to safely pull over and not but acoustically, you have two surfaces with something in the middle that stops the vibration. What's more is I have two pieces of it, and one I think is 5/8 inch thick and one is 7/8 inch thick. The different thicknesses, the asymmetry of it will stop the vibration. Plus, there's an air gap in between. I believe my whole window surface is 11 inches. So, and the glass kind of comes. Let me see if I can do this with my phone. All right, unfortunately, it's not letting me share with my phone. So let's just look at it here. You can see the distance here. This is pretty sizable. This is about 11. It's just shy of a foot. So with the sheetrock and everything, and there's a molding around it. So figure it's where the wood is. So one piece is here and the other piece is here. So there's an air gap of around 7 or 8 inches at least in the middle of that, and that air gap is crucial for stopping the transmission of sound. You can see here. So also, another thing that I did to stop sound from getting through, this is a double wall. Okay, let's see if you could see it better. Well, it's probably the best shot. But here you can see it right here. So you have literally a wall, and then there's an inch or so, and then there's another wall. What I did to combat sound from going in, so this space in here is my live room, and this space over here is my control room. So I wanted to be able to listen to music or audio here while I'm recording someone in here and not have the sound transfer through. So on each side of this wall is two pieces of sheetrock. One 1/2 inch piece of sheetrock and one what's called quiet rock, which is 2 1/4 inch pieces of sheetrock glued together. So there's essentially 3 pieces of sheetrock on every side. We can actually see that here. This is one section of the wall. This is the 1/2 inch piece of sheetrock, and this is the quiet rock, which is 2 pieces of 1/4 inch sheetrock glued together with a piece of like resonant material in the middle of it that's sandwiched in between. So you can see just how thick the sheetrock is. And also in the studio, everywhere I can, I've used something, you can see it here a little. Instead of using, actually, this is a good way to see it. Instead of using the pink insulation, I used something called mineral fiber, which is more expensive and a lot harder to work with, but its properties for treating sound are a lot better. Unlike the pink stuff, if you touch this, it just crumbles. So I have a drop ceiling on here now, and it's anytime I have to go up in there, I have to be very careful that I don't do anything funky. And I've also this mineral fiber is also, you can see it a little here. It's also stuffed in between the 2 walls in this space over here. You can sort of see it sticking out a little over there. Let me see if I have a better picture of that. Well, you can sort of see it there. There, you can see it right here. Here's more sound treatment. Okay, these panels, this is actually another bass trap over here. The bass traps go in the corner. This is an isolation cabinet for my guitar amp so that it doesn't, so notice here too, this is another thing I want to talk about, decoupling. So when you have something that vibrates like a speaker, the surface that it's on, so everything vibrates, right? So if your audio is loud enough, it's going to make your walls vibrate and become speakers in and of themselves. Now, it's not the way you think. It's not like it's going to play audio, but what do you hear when you're in another room and someone in the room next to you has music blaring, let's say? You don't hear it crystal clear. You hear this muffled low end because the low frequencies are what's strong enough to push all of that stuff. The best way to combat that is to decouple it. Okay. And decoupling it, like this is a great example of decoupling, where when I actually bought this setup, you can't really, let's see if I have another picture of it. Here is another picture of that that box in my old studio. So when I bought this, so this box is I don't know, I have any pictures of it open. Here is that box open. So I have my guitar amp in here. I keep it permanently mic'd, and it has all of this foam. And what you can't see behind the foam is something called limp mass rubber, and it's one of the few. So basically, it looks kind of like a desk mat almost. It's super thin, but it's rubber and it's very dense. It weighs a ton. And what that does is it stops or severely hinders vibration. It's one of the few materials that act better than its mass. So this box, I had a neighbor under me. So not only is there carpet here, you can see I have a drape over there to help. So to combat this box from vibrating on the floor and annoying my neighbor under me, I decoupled it by putting this white piece of foam under it. And that stops the vibration, that stops this vibrating box from vibrating the floor and making the floor act like a speaker. So decoupling is a great way to combat that. I'll show you some other products here. Hold on a moment. So for speakers, there are some great products. I used these for many years. In fact, I still have them. These are just foam pads. Okay, and you could sort of see a line there. So in case you want your speakers to be tilted or not tilted, it gives you the option to do that. But there are foam pads that basically stop the vibrating speaker from vibrating my desk. Now I use something called isopucks. They're basically this. It's kind of a similar thing. You put your speaker on this, and there are springs in there. Here's this isn't mine, but this is a picture of a monitor on top of one, and if so, basically just stops the vibration transfer from the speaker to the desk. Very simple, inexpensive way to treat where your speakers are. Even just going to Michael's and getting a piece of foam is going to help. Folding up a blanket or a towel or something and putting the speaker on that safely so that it doesn't fall, will help. Curtains, there are, obviously the thicker the better. So a thin sheer curtain isn't going to do much, but like a big thick curtain will help. There are acoustic curtains, and they're not crazy expensive. Moving blankets are fantastic for this sort of thing. Most studios have oodles of moving blankets for certain things, and it helps out quite a bit. So when you identify your window as a bad space, get a curtain, put a curtain over it. It'll help a lot. In a room that has a floor below you and above you, so that these are points of concern for keeping sound in or out. Decoupling things, make sure your desk isn't flat. So if you have no carpet in there, buy a rug. If your desk, here's another great thing. So I don't think I have any pictures of it, but my last desk and my current desk actually. All right, here are some pictures of what I'm talking about with the desk. So this is my current desk. None of these are my studio. I just found images. I can't use normally I could share with my phone and be able to walk around my studio, but it's not syncing, so I'm kind of improvising here. But this is my current desk. Oh, actually, that's not even my current desk, but actually it is. It's a little different. If you'll notice, this is what's hitting the floor. So it's this big flat piece of metal. In order to decouple this from the floor, now I don't really need to decouple it from the floor. I'm on a slab of concrete right now, and there's nothing below me, presumably. So I don't really need to worry about sound going down, but if I did, you can put it on wheels. Now, this isn't my studio either, but you could see that there are wheels on this. That decouples it from the floor. when I was a younger, a friend of mine had these set of audiophile speakers, and it was the one of the ones that they were on the floor and they're tall, and they had these spikes on the bottom. Let me find a picture of them. All right. So my friend had these kind of audiophile speakers with spikes on the bottom, and it looked similar to this. All right, they had these spikes on the bottom, and I, at first, my feeble little brain thought they were for gripping the carpet, and then after a second of thinking about it, like, when was the last time a speaker walked off into the sunset? What that does is it minimizes the surface area of it touching something. It's the surface that it's on for vibrations, minimizes the vibration transfer. So decoupling things is a good way to go. Putting something to stop the vibration transfer between something that vibrates versus something that shouldn't vibrate, like a desk or a wall. I built a temporary studio while I was having the room that I'm in now built. I had a temporary studio, and for a desk, I had a piece of kitchen countertop that I wasn't using, and I had these racks that I put it on top of. But the problem was the racks weren't deep enough to hold. The top started going like this, so I bolted a 2x4 onto the wall, and I rested it on top of that. Was a really bad idea, because now not only was the desk vibrating, but it was connected to the wall, making the wall vibrate as well. It was a really, really bad idea. So stuff like this will help you think about vibrations and where they go, and how everything kind of speaks to itself. If you're recording, let's say, a voiceover, you want to go into maybe your bedroom that has the bed and the drapes and stuff, or a closet. Closets are great, make great vocal booths. Just move your clothes aside and wedge yourself in there, and you're in a really kind of dead space, which is what you should be for a voiceover. If you're creating a space for a podcast, again, a bedroom is a good spot. I know it's probably not really feasible. It's certainly going to kill a vibe, but you want to not do it in a reverberant, loud space. Keeping outside noise to a minimum. If you live on the ground floor on a busy street, you have to combat that somehow. By having as much drapes and as much absorptive material in your room is really the best way to go. Finding out, if the window is if the window is really a bad spot, maybe try getting a piece of foam and cutting it, and wedging it into the window. That might help. Stuff like that. Nothing's gonna stop it completely, but if you minimize it enough, you could combat that. In my last studio, I lived very close to LaGuardia Airport in Long Island in Queens, and during rush hour, planes would be taking off literally every 60 seconds. So and you could hear them. And my microphones were sensitive enough to pick up the planes. So I had to really kind of insulate my window, which is where the sound was coming in from. I also had a neighbor below me who I was convinced was a professional launderer, clothes launderer, because her dryer was going 24 hours a day. And the dryer would shake the whole building. My microphones could pick up this low kind of. So I decoupled my mic stand from the floor. And even though it was on carpet, I bought 4 little pieces of foam, or 3 rather, and I stuck them under each leg of my microphone stand, and that stopped the vibration transfer, and it helped quite a bit. Also, using a lot of low cut filters helped out quite a bit with that. A lot of microphones, especially condenser microphones, have low cut filters on them, so that was also another way to combat that. Not ideal, but certainly did the trick. Let's see what else. So foam is your friend. you know, they say the egg cartons. Egg cartons are good for high frequencies, okay on mid, and you know, kind of useless on low frequencies. Um, Low frequencies are really going to be the hardest. If you're handy, you could just DIY it. There's specs for a Helmholtz resonator, which are expensive. They're very expensive, but there are DIY plans on the internet that you could download and build one yourself if you're handy, or if you know someone who's handy. I'm not at all. Actually, that amp box that I showed you, I tried to build one myself before I bought that, and it was a dismal failure. And it cost me what I spent on the box that I tried to build was more than what the box actually cost, because I ruined it. So, you know, that's an option if you're handy. The diffusion panels are easy to make. Like I said, you just cut molding and glue them together. It doesn't have to be the whole wall like I showed you in Blackbird Studio. It could be little panels. They sell little panels like that. And here, let's go do a tour for that. So here are some things. So this is a really good inexpensive way if you're doing a voiceover. So basically what this does is it gives you a little mini vocal booth to put your microphone on, and it kind of stops reflection right there. You know, I've never used one of these personally, but I know people who have, and they seem to like it. Let's look at some other products here. All right, so absorption, let's start with that. Foam panels, you know, again, great for high and mid frequencies. Bass traps. Here's some standing ones. All right, a little on the pricey side, but you could build something like this. This is a microphone stand with a foam panel on it. You could certainly build one for less than $400. These are what I have in my studio, the Prime Acoustics. Here's some corner wedges. This is a cloud from the ceiling. So this makes, you know, gives the ceiling a good way to really kind of combat sound. I should actually get this for my studio because I have a drop ceiling. It'll be very easy to install. Let's go ahead and see what more stuff they got. Yeah, it's kind of more of the same. Here's smaller panels for that. All right, so let's go to diffusion. You know, here are some panels. This is for like a drop ceiling, or you could mount these onto a wall. Not overly expensive. You know, again, this is just making the sound go and bounce into different places. Something like this certainly you know, is easier to build than spending the $500 on. Bass traps, bass frequencies are the hardest to deal with. This is probably your easiest and most cost-effective way. These work great. These are big, so depending on your space, you may not want something that size, but they work really well. We have some of these in the studio at Lehman. I'll show them to you. I don't know if they're Prime Acoustic brand, but they're the same concept. So isolation tools, these are monitored. These are decouple the monitor from the, you know, your speakers from the desk. Here's another version of that mic stand where you put a mic on this and it gives you kind of like a mini room. Here are some risers for speakers or amps. So let's take a minute actually and talk about proper construction if you were to actually build a room, because it's good to know this stuff. So here's that limp mass rubber. I wonder if is it? Yeah. Let's see. Does it tell you how much it weighs? It doesn't. Stuff weighs a ton. So when you're building something, yeah, this is all good stuff here. So let's talk about some construction stuff, just because pie in the sky, you know, you're building your room. The best way to do it is to what's called float the room. So our studio that we went into, our control room is floated. It's a room built within a room, and that room in the inner room could vibrate independently from the outer room. Okay. There are channels that you could put with foam and springs, and it literally just makes the inner room be able to. Now, I'm going like this; it's not moving this much, but it's essentially just putting the room on rubber grommets or springs. And when I say springs, I don't mean like doing doing. I mean like, kind of tight springs, and it just stops the vibration from leaving or entering. Um, One of the best things to do to stop sound from getting in or out is adding mass, and adding mass unevenly. So, for example, let's say you've had a really bad problem with sound coming in or out, and you had the ability to alter the room enough. Um, I would rip the sheetrock off. I would put a layer of plywood, and then maybe a layer of sheetrock, plywood, and sheetrock. So maybe keep the sheetrock up, put a layer of plywood, another layer of sheetrock. You're only really adding an inch or so to your space, and make sure the joints are not the same. Make sure the joints overlap. So if this is the joint of the sheetrock, make sure that the plywood joint is over here, so that they're staggered, that they're not together, because then you have this gap for sound to get out of. So that's kind of a quick, sort of inexpensive, and sort of not too altering. You're not knocking walls down or anything like that. If you're handy with stuff like that, it's a quick way to sort of add mass to your room. If you could put air in between things, I mean, that's always not feasible. I mean, who has that kind of space? But if you did, adding air is, building a wall and making that wall, 6 inches away from the existing wall will help. Putting that limp mass rubber in between anything, so even just adding another layer of sheetrock by putting that limp mass rubber. I did that in my studio in Queens. I just took that stuff and I glued it onto the sheetrock. It was a mess when I moved, but it worked. I was in that room for 11 years, 12 years, and I never got a complaint from my neighbors. So and I was a heavily active. I was full-time composer and engineer. I mean, I was making music in there all day long, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year. I literally, it's all I did was work. So, and I never got a complaint from my neighbors. Not with the guitar amps, not with the people that came in to record, because I did have a lot of people come in and out to record, and not with the mixing late hours of night and so on and so forth. Let's see. So here, let's look at some other construction materials. This is something that would, you could put the cloud up with to stop it from vibrating. This is kind of insulation. These are channels. Here's another channel. You would put this on the studs, and then you would attach the sheetrock to this. It would stop the vibration transfer. Here's another thing to float the floor. You would put the beams on this piece of rubber here, and then you would put the floor on those, like you were just building your floor up from there. Again, this is radical stuff, but it's good to know. Yeah, this is all kind of more of the same stuff. You could actually buy a room if you had the space. Let's say you have a garage that you don't use, that you want to dedicate to making content. You could actually buy a room. There are companies like vocalbooth.com is where I got my my amp box, vocalbooth.com. And there are other couple of companies that make stuff like that. They actually make a room big enough for drums. So like, if let's say you wanted to have a small podcast room and you had a garage, you could actually buy that room and set it up in your garage and not have to worry about treating anything else in the garage. Now, let's talk about the last thing, which is often forgotten. As a matter of fact, I forgot it. I'm doing it last, and it's probably the most expensive. I know we've talked about things that are expensive up until now, but this trumps it. That is ventilation, HVAC. Okay. The biggest mistake I see in studios is people don't adequately plan for and implement ventilation. Air conditioners vibrate. Heat is a little easier. You can, I have an oil heater in my, I have a ductless unit. Let's go back to my studio. I have a ductless unit in my studio. This is the old configuration. This desk is I no longer have, so I'm pretty much sitting right here, facing this way. But I have a ductless unit here. So this has a unit outside, and then this is heating and cooling. I also have a oil heater that's a little bit more efficient, and it's whisper quiet. This actually makes a little noise. And I only have one in this room. So to get this room, which is where I would have my musicians or my talent, if I was doing a voiceover or something like that, to keep this room hot and cold, I actually, let's see, I have a picture of it somewhere here. So I have right over here, I have a fan that sucks the air from this room, and you can see that this is kind of gray. This is a big tube, and it brings it to this room, and it deposits the air into this room. So the room that needs to be quiet has no fans in it. All the fans are in the room that I'm in now. Let me try syncing my phone up one more time, because that would really be the best way to show this. All right, good. I got this to work. Okay, so I'm going to take you guys on a quick tour of my studio. So this is how I get air into my live room. So I turn the fan on, and you can hear it. It makes noise. It's sucking the air here, and it's running along a tube into my live room. Let's go up to there. And you can see it's blowing there. Now I have it on high. Let me lower it a little bit because it's making a little too much noise. Normally wouldn't keep it this high. So here it's making noise and it's sucking the air in from here, but in here it doesn't make any noise. And you can see I have that little string to show that it's actually making air come in. Okay, so sorry, I'm a little bit of a mess here, but so we have the curtain here. So this is a nice thick curtain. And then let me show you so this is the thickness of the wall. Here, I'll use my hand as a guide to show you how thick this wall is. I have two doors. So double doors, these are solid doors. And then here is the glass. So there's glass on both sides of this, and it's sealed, and it's two thicknesses, and there's a gap of about 8 or 9 inches in there. Here are my speakers. So these are cool speakers. So this is a high frequency driver, a mid driver, and then I have a bass driver over here, and they are on these isolation pucks, which decouple it from the desk, and the desk, mess here, is on wheels to decouple it from the floor. I have my bass traps over here, so let me see if I could show you this. So this is caddy corner. You can sort of see it from there. I could actually reach my hand under here. There's a space. I don't know if you could see that. But there's lots of treatment. Okay, a little wall of shame. Curtains. So this is an area of a problem here. So this is something I'm addressing because I'm in a basement. I'm actually planning on putting a curtain that runs over here to block off this area. But it's not so bad. This was a concern when I had my mix desk was over here, but now it's over here. So I'm sort of, I have to really concern myself with treating this wall here, which is directly behind it, which I will get to at some point. So yeah, so this is my space. Let's see what else. So lots of treatment in here. More bass traps. These are all the TV shows I've written music for. So all of that is in there. I don't have a curtain on here, but these this is actually below ground. I'm in a basement. This isn't the press window. So we are actually underground right now. So this is just like a egress. So I don't really have to worry about sound coming up too much from this space. I'm also on a slab here, so there's concrete below me, so I don't have to worry about sound from there. And above me, I have a drop ceiling, and it's just my family above me, so I'm in a house. So the only thing I have to do is I have to let my kids know that when I'm recording, they can't walk above this room because I can hear their footsteps. So, which is not really a problem. So yeah, this is my studio. Look, this is you. This is you looking at me, looking at you, looking at me, looking at you, looking at me. Okay. All right. This concludes my talk on acoustics. Hope you found it informative, and I urge you to formulate some questions and let me know what they are. Bring them in the class and we'll talk about them. I'll see you. Okay, there was one thing I did forget to mention that I do want to mention because it's fun. There is a room, there's a type of room. There aren't many in the country. In fact, there's one not far from my house here at Brookhaven Lab. And I'm actually going to see if I could reach out to someone there and see if there's any tours that they give through, because I think it would be really super exciting. But there's a room called an anechoic chamber. And there are, I don't know how many there are in the country, but a lot of companies use rooms like this to test out how things react sound-wise to their products. And scientists do lots of tests, but it is a room with no echoes. So I wanted to show you this quick little video on it because it is super exciting. Anechoic chamber. All right, so this is in Minneapolis, quietest place on earth. It has music playing in it.
An anechoic chamber is a standardized test facility. And it's a facility where, by definition, it's close to 100% sound absorbent. We filed to have the quietest acoustic lab in the world. And Guinness had never had a negative decibel claim, and so they said, we'd rather just call it the quietest place on earth. And we said, that's fine. The first thing I noticed is the silence in the chamber. And the second thing I noticed is that my eyes seemed to process differently. When you become disoriented, you always look for secondary senses. And so when you walk into an anechoic chamber, your anchor is your vision because the sound doesn't make sense to you. And over a period of time, it would generate hallucinations in most people if they have the patience and the willingness to stay there at all. All right, so that's an anechoic chamber. I actually just did a quick little bit of research, and now I'm not so sure that Brookhaven Lab actually has an anechoic chamber. But I am going to do some further research. I think I have a cousin who used to work there, so maybe we'll reach out to him. Because it would be cool if we could
find one and tour one. But that's an anechoic chamber. It's a cool little scientific thing to know. All right, guys, this is the acoustics lecture. I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and I will see you next week.